I'm on a camel, or as I like to call it, my desert Uber. 5 stars for this guy, for sure. There's been a lot of buzz about my arrival in Dubai, and I'm out here today talking to my adoring fans about why they're excited to see me. Pretty exciting to meet me, right? You know who I am?
I have no clue.
I have no idea who you are. You're a crazy man.
Responsible for 90% of all security breaches. Ringing a bell?
Nope.
No. Stay where you are. You don't have to get out. You're a pretty big guy. Do you know Jamie Fernandez?
Of course I do. We get together at all the big guy conventions.
We should start a band.
Totally, like some death metal from Florida. I'm all in.
Hey, Saheem.
Hey.
How'd you get up here?
You better click everything, download anything. All links are safe.
Hey, can I ask you a question?
Sure, man.
You got any dirt on Jamie Fernandez? Hey, good to see you. I don't have time for autographs right now. Is this cereal?
No.
I'm Human Air.
Human Air.
Yeah.
Oh.
Right on cue. Do you recognize me?
Jack Sparrow.
Jack Sparrow. I keep getting that.
You got a handsome mouth.
Oh, thank you. Pretty big deal, huh? Are you nervous?
Not nervous. I don't even know who you are, to be honest.
Yeah. Tambayo, tamba.
Nowadays, ain't nobody know. In the end, was it done with a purpose? Tell me how you feel. Was it worth it?
Just go click it. Go and click it. Click on anything.
Tell me if that picture looks perfect. Tell me if that picture looks good.
Tell me if that link looks safe. Go ahead and click it.
Anyways.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thank you so much.
Human Air in Dubai.
Yeah, baby. Human Air here, smack dab in the heart of the nation's capital, Washington, D.C., where I'm celebrating National Cybersecurity Awareness Month, which, as I understand it, is a month-long festival celebrating me and my many accomplishments. I'm out here today on the streets talking to real people, finding out how they plan to honor me this month. It's National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. How do you plan on celebrating?
I don't know. Until I met you, I didn't even understand that was happening.
You're supposed to be celebrating me,
Oh.
Human Air.
Probably taking a nap.
That's good. I love that. A month-long nap like a bear. It's like a month-long festival celebrating me. Tienes una fiesta para mí. People are throwing parties for me, so I was thinking we could do it at your house. What kind of party would you throw for a guy like me?
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The Cyber Resilience Summit will begin shortly. Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The Cyber Resilience Summit is about to begin.
The stories are everywhere. Hospital systems knocked offline, power grid goes down. Ransomware attacks bring major cities to their knees. Or which company or town would get hit next? There's much more at stake than people realize. Technology continues to evolve in ways we could never have imagined. With every new innovation comes a new level of risk. The threat landscape's constantly shifting. Attack vectors change. In such an interconnected world, all it takes is a single cyber incident to devastate a company or take down a city. How do we stop bad things from happening to good organizations? It's not enough to figure out what happened. We need to understand the magnitude of the incident and its impact on every stakeholder. Let's talk about disruption.
Security breach, another major cyber attack. Disrupting businesses and government offices around the world.
Huge disruptions.
It's the latest in a cyber warfare campaign shutting down Russian banks, European businesses, even a U.S. drug giant.
Britain, Russia, Germany, Norway, and the United States are reporting serious disruption.
So why are these stories so impactful and why are there so many of them? And what's changed over the last 10 or 15 years? Well, almost everything we do is now dependent on digital technology and systems. So the first thing we need to consider is that dependency.
We don't think about how dependent we are on it until it goes away.
Everything we're doing is really dependent on computer networks.
We've embedded technology into every aspect of our lives.
We also need to look at interdependency. Our systems don't exist in a vacuum. They connect with other systems, which are connected to other systems and so on. And this digital ecosystem is the reason why someone else's disruption can be disruptive to us.
You might be secure, but if your third parties aren't secure, you're not secure.
The last thing that's changed dramatically over the years is regulation. If you're the victim of a cyber attack and your customer data is exposed, you may get hit with a significant fine, insult to injury. One day you're the victim and the next you're regarded as the villain.
If a company is found in violation of GDPR, for example, it's likely going to be that they mishandled or shared data in a way that was forbidden.
Those are the three sides of our disruption triangle. So here we are, we're doing our part to hold this ecosystem together. And we realize that there are three more factors ready to challenge us. Consider this the triple threat. First, we have malicious action. The hackers are out there and they're trying to wreak havoc and make money.
Whenever there is opportunity, I think you have crime.
As the security technology evolves, so do the attackers, and so do the ways that they manage to access these systems.
Next is human error. Our people often take shortcuts, they make mistakes, and they inadvertently let the hackers in.
Attackers typically go after the weakest link.
You could be the person that compromises your whole organization.
And the final factor is technical failure. Breakdowns and disasters, they do happen. And technology is never perfect. And when it's influenced by human error or exploited by malicious action, you have the potential for seismic or catastrophic disruption.
There will be disruption because it's not a matter of if, it's when.
This idea of software eating the world. Do you think we've become more vulnerable in the last, let's say, 10 or 20 years?
Yeah, absolutely. Almost everything that we're bringing into our homes nowadays has some type of digital presence. And what does that mean?
The threat is changing and evolving so quickly.
There's inevitability to the sense that there are going to continue to be cyber attacks, continue to be data breaches, continue to be online extortion.
You don't know exactly when it's going to happen, but you know it's going to happen.
With new technology comes new concerns about cybersecurity.
Big gaps in IT security systems, leaving sensitive data open to hackers.
We got the writer, the protector, and the teacher. It'd be lovely just to hear a little bit about your day jobs.
I'm an information security writer. I write for the Synopsys Software Integrity blog. Once a week, I write a post that appears on the Forbes platform.
Q.
My title would be Deputy CISO for the City of New York and also doubles as Head of Threat Management for New York City Cyber Command.
Josephine, tell us about your role and your job in the game.
I'm an assistant professor of cybersecurity policy at Tufts University. So I do a lot of research on what kinds of policies governments and organizations are making around data and network security. And then the other component of my job is teaching.
Who's more dangerous, someone who's trying to steal your money or someone who's trying to disrupt your life?
The effects can certainly be felt in very different ways.
If a city goes dark for a week and a half, that could be vastly more catastrophic.
Absolutely.
If a hospital gets attacked with ransomware and you can't do surgery for a week, what does that mean?
What makes ransomware so attractive?
It monetizes this range of data that was never worth anything before, but it's valuable to me. So if you encrypt it and you hold it hostage and you sell it back to me, then you've created a market for all of this data that was otherwise worthless.
So ransomware attackers, obviously they can be anywhere on the planet. You won't know them, you won't see them, and most of the time you won't catch them.
There's been a lot of talk about ransomware for sure, but I think of it as destructive malware in general. It can be a means to siphon money, but then can also just be used as a method to disrupt.
Ransomware that hit computers in more than 150 countries.
Online payments and city real estate transactions have come to a halt.
So Q phones you up, Josephine, and says, I'm looking for some advice here. I'm going to make a decision to bail us out by paying a ransom.
This is theoretical.
Theoretical, yeah, theoretical example.
So I come down pretty hard on the side of not paying ransoms, and I understand the cost-benefit analysis, but the flip side of that is that you are directly funding the criminal groups that are deploying these ransomware attacks.
The long-term impact of that is that you're probably going to encourage more ransomware.
And on top of that, you haven't solved your problem, right? You haven't solved the fact that you were a city that had infrastructure that was so insecure it was possible to do this.
They only need one door in, and from a security perspective, the professionals have to secure all doors.
Cyber insurance, something we should all have, or?
It's complicated.
We need to do more than just ask our insurance companies to make those payments. We need to say, how do we actually secure this city's systems?
How can we now bolster our defenses to make sure that we're not in this situation again? Or can I just leave my network as it is or my processes as they are and just call on my cyber insurance the next time this occurs?
What draws you to this space? What makes you passionate about cybersecurity?
It's a human story. And what has really been interesting to me is the way technology affects people.
The human factor, how much do you worry about that?
That's major for us. Human error is probably one of the biggest things that we think about, and how do we ensure that our users are very aware and vigilant?
A lot of incidents still trace back to attachments, to emails. The ease with which you can spoof email addresses, the ease with which people can impersonate other people, it's still today one of the most valuable tools for people distributing malware.
Yeah, I would agree with that, especially because it's pretty much a #1 communication tool.
Q, there's a lot at stake here. How do we get ahead of this?
Ransomware is only effective if you don't have proper backups in place. And that's not a security thing, that's just a network operations type of thing.
So you're talking really there about a much more integrated approach between both the IT infrastructure discipline and the security discipline.
We really have to develop a cyber resiliency strategy, so How do we take a step back from the tactical and really think strategically about how we're moving the needle with regards to preparation and response?
It always costs more to fix something than it does to prevent something.
Defense in depth is hugely important. We want to have defensive controls at each layer of the technology stack.
It's not just a question of developing better technology, but also making sure that there's an environment where people are using the technology that we have.
What's our continuity of operations? How are we making sure that we're resilient if something does happen?
A lot of this risk management game is about avoiding disruptions and keeping business and cities and organizations functioning on an ongoing basis. What do you think we should be doing differently to improve the situation?
I'd like to see a lot more clarity for especially these small, medium-sized businesses that aren't sure where to start, that are worried about the resources and the spending.
It seems to me that there is a sort of conceptual problem that we have, which is that I can't do this because I can't afford it. I can't afford the time, I can't afford the money. Instead of thinking of it that way, in the long term, it's going to save you time and money and a tremendous amount of disruption.
So these are some really great thoughts on the issues. I'd like to build on this and add a few ideas to the mix. What I'd love to talk with you about more today is the cyber resilience imperative. We're really going to cover 4 things during my talk. Firstly, I'd love to give you a little bit of a background on Mimecast, why we started the company back 16 years ago, and where we are in that journey, and what makes us tick, what makes Mimecasters tick today. Then we'll talk about the cyber resilience imperative, which I believe is the single greatest shared responsibility that we as IT and security professionals need to come together to achieve. And I'll talk about some of the challenges in achieving cyber resilience and how we're innovating to try and help you overcome those. And I'll bring up some custom examples to share with you how customers are able to use our technologies to enhance the capabilities of their teams and to achieve cyber resilience. And then finally, I'd love to talk a little bit about email security. It's the thing that many of you know us for, but we have a point of view on the industry, where it's come from, where it's going, and we'd like to share with you how we're innovating to take email security forward in a way that can help you build more cybersecurity and resilience too. So a little bit of a personal story. Back in 1996, due to a scheduling error, I landed up on an email certification course to become an expert in Microsoft Mail, which was the precursor to Exchange. And then I spent the next couple of years feeling rather unimportant, because email didn't really matter to companies in 1996 or 1997. But within a few short years, it became the mission-critical application. And as it became this mission-critical application, it also became more complicated and more dangerous. You see, email wasn't designed inherently for security. It assumed far too much trust. It also wasn't designed to store vast amounts of data on a persistent basis. But that is how organizations were starting to use it. And so it became complicated because an ecosystem or an industry of point solutions grew up around corporate email. Things for archiving, things for security, things for disclaimer management, technologies to provide high availability for email. And we saw how these were overwhelming many organizations, many IT teams for whom email just was a continuous work in progress. Who can remember those years? And so we started Mimecast with one key idea. How could we fix this problem of complexity? And we figured that if we could build one single integrated suite and we could use what is now known as cloud technology to do it, we might be able to address this problem at industry scale. And so if we wind forward to where we are today, we're so excited to be able to help over 35,000 organizations with this problem and to have been able to build a business that today employs about 1,700 wonderful human beings that we call Mimecasters. We took the company public on NASDAQ in 2015, and that has really helped us to grow and to have access to the capital and the profile that we needed. And today, we do a huge amount of work for our customers through this platform that we've built. We deliver over 500 million emails every single day. We protect customers from an enormous number of threats. On a monthly basis, over 22 billion. Within that, interestingly, every single day, about 1 million impersonation emails show up. Things pretending to be someone inside your organization that is not somebody from your organization. And in our archives, we store over 15 petabytes of data. It's over 300 billion individual messages. It's an awful lot of stuff. And I think as you had a look at the video, and when we look at the things that we're involved with and we think through this, we really built a strong sense of what's at stake in our digital ecosystem and started to think about our purpose as a company and the work that we do with our partners and with our customers as being in the business of helping to stop bad things happen to good organizations. And our sense is that if we can empower you, if we can help by delivering the technologies that are needed in a simpler, less costly way, together we can restore trust. In fact, we can sustain humanity and we can make the world more resilient together. So today there are many headlines like these. And maybe just 10 years ago, you wouldn't have seen headlines like these. And they remind us of our growing dependency and our growing interdependency on technology and a new source of fragility that was completely different, certainly when I started my career in IT. And so the big question that we have is, are we becoming more fragile? Where does all of this technology lead us to? And how do we need to start thinking differently about our digital risk reality? How is that picture changing? So if we recap on some of the concepts that we had a look at in the video, this idea that we've moved all of our business processes onto digital technology, I remember my very first business, we had lever arch files, one per customer. That was totally hacker-proof until the fire. No, there wasn't a fire, don't worry. But we've moved radically towards digital systems today. I don't remember the last time I ever saw a lever arch file. This interdependency of connecting all of our business systems up to each other's business systems to create value chains is really interesting and really helpful and allowing us to innovate and create new things. But we're now dependent on systems that we don't control, we don't secure, we can't see. And so it's not a bad thing, it's just a different thing. And we have to think about this digital risk reality a little bit differently. And then, of course, regulation. British Airways is facing a $230 million fine for GDPR violations following a breach that they had. As we said in the video, from victim to villain. That makes this a pretty risky landscape for people like us in the room. And so we're trying to protect against disruption in this environment. And our three old friends, human error, malicious action, and technology failure, are all things that, while not new, have a very different attack surface that they're working on. And there's something else that's changed too. As cloud computing and as software as a service has grown in its popularity, we've all started to move to the same providers. Who would have thought perhaps just 10 years ago that the whole world would agree to put all of their customer data, not in lever arch files, but with the same customer data management environment called Salesforce? There's a huge majority of organizations have all their customer data there. Or that everybody would decide to use the same hosted exchange provider with Office 365. I certainly wouldn't have predicted that 15 years ago, but that is what is happening today. It's tremendously convenient, it's lowering the cost of IT, but it is creating new concentrations of risk. And it's also creating a homogeneous security environment that affords great advantages of scale to attackers. And these are things that we have to think about, because now we have the potential for massive economic or societal disruption. So being mindful of these changes and thinking about the new types of strategies that we need to have are very important. And so we see regulatory bodies, like this is the Australian regulator for the financial services industry, talking about reducing the impact of cyber incidents by strengthening cyber resilience. And when we talk about the cyber resilience imperative, this is really about working together to make sure that we can, at best, avoid, that would be ideal, but at worst, withstand and learn from and get better as a result of setbacks and cyber incidents. But the challenge is that cyber resilience, once again, comes with potentially tremendous cost and complexity. To give you a sense of how this has changed, in 2010, in the US, we spent about $27 billion annually on cybersecurity. By 2018, it jumped to $66 billion. That's a huge amount of additional cost that organizations have to bear to deal with this problem. And that reminds us to some extent of where we were with email management when we started Mimecast. There's just an awful lot of stuff to buy and manage. And that's a real bummer, because we have the skills and budget gap. The skills gap today, 3 million jobs almost on a global basis unfilled in cybersecurity. And that's a global issue, which makes it expensive to find people. It makes it difficult to keep them. And that's a global issue that we face. And so it's really not a surprise that over half of organizations are really just not confident that they have the ability to deal with anything more than a very basic cyber intrusion. The challenge is, though, that we're all in this together because we rely on our law firms, our town governments, our banks, our schools, our hospitals, because they're our supply chains. They're managing our data. They're delivering vital services to us. Many of those services are digital services. So their security is our security. Their resilience is our resilience. You know, the Target retailer, the big hack that happened, well reported some years ago, their HVAC supplier was compromised, and that's how the people got into the attack. That's pretty well known. I mean, who here thinks about the cybersecurity at HVAC suppliers every day? Certainly that's not a thing we would commonly concern ourselves with. But we need to start to understand our collective responsibility. And that's a responsibility to each other to be secure and resilient. So when you think about these problems, or you think about this challenge, solving a problem where you need more capabilities with lower cost and lower complexity, those objectives are at odds. Resources versus capabilities. This really requires deep design and architecture, and sometimes the use of new technologies. And so a classic, if not cliche example, is these guys, Johnny and Steve, masters of design and architecture. They built a new kind of architecture and designed something that could take all of these goodies and bring them together into a device that provides capabilities to people who would otherwise normally not be able to overcome the cost and complexity of possessing all of those different items. But how are those things useful today, to have all of those things at our disposal? So they cracked the code of cost and complexity by using a unique approach to design and architecture. And so we take this thinking, we borrow from this thinking, and we think about IT and security teams that are buying a lot of these different tools and technologies, and we think about how can we start approaching this problem? How can we deal with this tension between capabilities required for resilience, as well as keeping things easy and cheap? And so we built email security as our initial application. Think of that like Apple's iPod. What was important was that it was based on a design ideology and on an architecture. And so in our case, multi-tenancy, cloud-based architectures, and then reusable components that could solve many different types of problems, initially email security, but scanning and detection technology, machine learning, data storage, policy enforcement engines, and then we wrapped that in an API so that we could keep building and we could create more things of use on top of that. And so we added data protection so that we could remove the need for archiving and backup around email as well. And then we added web security so that customers could have more protection but fewer moving parts to manage in their environment. And then awareness training, strengthening the human firewall and removing the need for yet another point solution. And then more recently, threat intelligence. Now we realize that while we will continue to incrementally build capabilities, deliver more resilience, and keep making things easier and more cost-effective, our customers still may want to choose other solutions, or they may have them for legacy purposes. There may be things we never build as well. And so this API really becomes so powerful, allowing us to build an ecosystem where we can integrate and connect with those other investments. And we're going to talk a lot during this summit about our ecosystem, and I'll have some of our ecosystem partners up here on the stage a little bit later this afternoon to talk about that as well. So we continue this journey, and our focus is really on making it easier by delivering this as a single integrated suite that requires fewer people to manage, less expertise, and has a much more ergonomically efficient work surface, while at the same time delivering this as a platform that makes it highly accessible to companies of all sizes, from very large firms all the way down to smaller firms, who can benefit from these types of capabilities on a scalable price point based on the number of employees on a subscription fee. And so let's talk about how this plays out in the life of a real customer. So Texas Pipe and Supply. Tim Barth heads up IT there. He's the IT director. He's been with the firm for about 7 years, so he knows where the bodies are buried. This is a classic lean IT and security team. While the organization has about 1,100 employees across about 28 locations, and they do about $1 billion in sales, these 10 people in IT have to cover all of the IT and security disciplines together. And that means that they can't afford to buy lots of different disconnected things, because these things just become shelfware in their organizations. They need solutions that can do many things, not just a patchwork of solutions. And those were the exact words that Tim used when we spoke a couple of weeks ago. So what they've been able to do is displace 5 different point solutions and adopted Mimecast for email security, archiving, continuity, web security, and awareness training, all within their Mimecast subscription. So Tim and his team have been able to increase cyber resilience meaningfully whilst decreasing cost and complexity at the same time. Now, we do have many customers that have more resources than Texas Pipe and Supply. Let's take HP, for example. You know, they have tens of thousands of employees. They have bigger teams. Naturally, they have bigger budgets. And what they were looking for was the very best email security that they could get their hands on. Because as an Office 365 user, they were being bombarded with spear phishing, impersonation attacks, and very advanced malware that was targeting HP in a particularly crafty way. And so they implemented Mimecast to provide that defense on top of Office 365 and some of their hybrid Exchange servers that they still have inside their organization. And then, understanding the value of consolidation and the importance of the human firewall, HP has added awareness training to their subscription so they can have a robust defense on that side, strengthening security and consolidating into two solutions into one. So email security is at the core of what we do. And I thought it'd be fun just to have a very quick history lesson on this email security industry. And then we'll talk, before wrapping up, about where we see it going and how we're innovating and investing. So back in 1998, I mentioned I'd been certified as an email system engineer in the mid-90s. I remember clearly working at South African breweries. Actually, most of working at South African breweries, I don't remember very clearly. That's a joke. When the first viruses broke out that came in via email, and pandemonium broke loose. And that was about 1997. And so the email security industry really got going. It became mainstream kind of after that point. 1998 really started the need to have filtering for spam and viruses. and it progressively grew and became a bigger and bigger industry, but a perimeter-based discipline. And then from about 2013, we started to see how cyber attackers figured out that email could be one of the most useful things in their kit bag. They started to use URLs embedded in email to conduct phishing and spear phishing. They started to introduce forms of malware that you couldn't detect with signatures and classic antivirus technologies. Sometimes they required other more advanced techniques or even detonation inside sandboxes. They started to impersonate people, and so this perimeter discipline really had to upgrade itself to the next level. And you saw targeted threat protection being added to that perimeter defense. And then as we got into 2018, we saw how that was not going to be enough on its own. Compromised accounts, social engineering, meant that inside of the perimeter, we really had to start paying attention to the email security threats that lurked inside an organization. Beyond that, attackers started to abuse brands and domains that belong to companies out there in the wild in ways that never came to the perimeter or never came inside the perimeter. They were directly targeting the customers or the public, leveraging brands and domains that companies had spent years or decades building up trust in. And so the industry is evolving yet again in this direction that we will talk about as email security 3.0. And the interesting thing about this attack vector, or the way this has evolved, is that the response time to threats has also had to accelerate. From right in the beginning, where you had weeks or days to react, now to having minutes, seconds, or milliseconds, where your system needs to be able to detect and respond. And so this concept of email security 3.0, we think of as moving from having been a perimeter-based discipline to being a much more pervasive discipline. And we'll talk about that and the 3 zones that come into play from that perspective. So firstly, we have zone 1, which we're very familiar with. It was the first one. And that is the perimeter. And in a world of perimeterless stuff, which is a lot of the sort of security industry buzzwordery, email kind of always has a perimeter because you have to point your MX record somewhere. And that's where the messages come in and very often go out of an organization through a gateway. And that's a very useful place to concentrate controls, whether that is looking for malware or spear phishing or applying content controls and data leak prevention controls in your environment. The established perimeter, and obviously I imagine the majority of you are using our technologies to help protect you there. Then we have zone 2, which goes inside the perimeter. And that is about that east-west traffic, examining that, using many of the same technologies at the gateway to analyze that internal traffic, to identify compromised accounts, to identify bad things that might exist inside the network and being able to remediate them. But taking that a step further, looking at the human being using email. So having awareness training and other technologies that can help you instrument what the susceptibility of these people in your organization are and how do you upgrade them as a human firewall through awareness training. And then the third layer, the third zone, if you like, beyond the perimeter. That is about taking down threats before they even get seen at your perimeter. Detecting, threat hunting, looking for bad things being put together out there on the internet and intercepting them. Proliferating blocking techniques across our network and other people's networks in anticipation of them being used while we work ferociously to extract and eliminate them. And also helping you to enforce the cyber hygiene that you need with things like DMARC to protect the domains that you do own from being explicitly abused. But as we talk about this move from perimeter to pervasive email security, we're very much talking about these 3 zones, but we're also talking about the ability to use the APIs that can capitalize on this rich threat environment, this rich set of telemetry and intelligence that we can gather by being right at the coalface, at the front line of defending email, to make these other systems smarter, to integrate them with endpoints, with firewalls, with SIM and source systems, to give you more visibility, more controls, more intelligence. And so creating pervasive value from your email security strategy that goes beyond the perimeter and into your broader ecosystem. So finally, if I were to leave you with nothing else, it would be an understanding that the world is changing. Our dependency and our interdependency on technology is accelerating. It's increasing rapidly. And our IT and security is no longer isolated to affect and protect just ourselves. You know, maybe in some ways it's like the immune system in a body. Naturally, that protects you, that helps to keep you safe. But it's also vital to prevent the spread of a disease among others too. And so today, in a world where disruptions can be seismic, and these disruptions can be contagious, we're vulnerable to disruption that can affect the whole economy, or perhaps the whole of society. And so each one of us has a responsibility to be a strong citizen of this digital economy for the good of us all. So I want to thank you for the work that you do as IT and security professionals to help make the world more cyber resilient. Thank you.